There was a time when Australia felt different, not because life was perfect, but because millions of Australians believed tomorrow would be better than today. Long before smartphones, online shopping, or global supply chains, Australia was being built by ordinary people with extraordinary determination. Many of those people were our parents and grandparents. They weren't famous, they weren't wealthy, yet together, they helped shape the Australia that generations would later call the Australian dream. After the Second World War, Australia faced enormous challenges. Cities needed rebuilding. Industries needed workers. Families wanted stability after years of sacrifice. The Australian government launched one of the largest immigration programs in the nation's history, welcoming people from Europe and many other parts of the world. These new Australians arrived with little more than hope, determination, and a willingness to work. Together with families already living across Australia, they laid railway tracks, built factories, cleared farmland, constructed homes, and helped expand growing cities. Every brick they laid became part of modern Australia. Every road they built connected another Australian community. Every factory they opened created opportunities for thousands of Australian families. For many people, owning a home didn't seem like an impossible dream. A steady Australian job could support a family. Children believed they could enjoy a better life than their parents. That belief became one of Australia's greatest strengths. It wasn't simply about earning more money. It was about believing that hard work, honesty, and perseverance could build a secure future. Of course, life wasn't easy. Many Australians worked long hours in difficult conditions. Factories were noisy. Construction sites were demanding. Farms required endless physical labor. But there was also a powerful sense that every sacrifice was helping build something bigger than themselves. By the 1950s and 1960s, Australia wasn't just growing. It was becoming a nation filled with confidence, ambition, and optimism. Few people realized they were living through an era that future generations would one day remember as the foundation of the Australian dream. As Australia entered the 1950s and 1960s, something remarkable was happening. The country wasn't simply growing, it was building a future with its own hands. Across Australia, factories worked day and night. Steel mills lit up the skyline. Shipyards echoed with the sound of hammers. Assembly lines produced products proudly stamped "Made in Australia." For thousands of Australian families, manufacturing wasn't just an industry, it was the foundation of everyday life. One of the greatest symbols of this era was Holden. For many Australians, buying a Holden wasn't just purchasing a car. It was celebrating Australian engineering, Australian workers, and Australian pride. Every vehicle represented thousands of jobs across Australia, from steelworkers and mechanics to designers and suppliers. At the same time, one of the most ambitious engineering projects in Australian history was taking shape: the Snowy Mountains scheme. Thousands of workers from dozens of countries came together in Australia to build tunnels, dams, and hydroelectric stations. It became more than an infrastructure project. It became proof that people from different backgrounds could help build one stronger Australia. Across the nation, new highways connected Australian cities. New schools welcomed growing communities. New hospitals expanded healthcare for Australian families. Country towns flourished as local factories, farms, and businesses created secure employment. Every successful industry strengthened another part of Australia's economy. Steel supported construction. Construction created homes. Homes built communities. Communities built confidence. Perhaps the greatest achievement wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in opportunity. Millions of Australians believed that if they worked hard, they could buy a home, raise a family, and retire with dignity. That confidence became part of Australia's identity. So looking back today, it's easy to admire the buildings, roads, and factories. But the real legacy wasn't concrete or steel. It was the determination of ordinary Australians who believed they weren't simply earning a living day. We're building a nation that future generations would proudly call home. For millions of Australians, success wasn't measured by luxury. It was measured by stability, family, and the simple comforts of everyday life. Across Australia, many families lived on a single income. One Australian wage often paid the mortgage, covered the bills, and still left enough for a family holiday or a weekend barbecue. That didn't mean every Australian family was wealthy. Far from it. Many Australians worked physically demanding jobs, often 6 days a week. But there was a widespread belief that hard work would be rewarded with a better future. In suburbs and country towns across Australia, children rode their bikes until sunset. Backyard cricket brought neighbors together every weekend. The local milk bar wasn't just a shop. It was where Australian kids spent pocket money, shared stories, and made lifelong friendships. Across Australia, neighbors often knew each other's names. Front doors were rarely locked during the day. Communities looked after elderly residents, celebrated local events, and supported families during difficult times. There was a feeling that everyone belonged to something larger than themselves. Australian country towns were filled with life. Factories provided steady employment. Local businesses thrived because people bought Australian-made products. Schools became the heart of many communities, while sporting clubs connected generations of Australians every weekend. The Australian dream wasn't simply about owning a house. It was about building a life. It meant watching children grow up in safe neighborhoods. It meant believing that the next generation would enjoy even greater opportunities. Of course, life wasn't perfect. Many Australians faced financial struggles, discrimination, and limited opportunities, especially women, Indigenous Australians, and some migrant communities. Remembering the past honestly means recognizing both its strengths and its shortcomings. Yet despite those challenges, there was an optimism that united much of Australia. People believed tomorrow could be better than today. Perhaps that's why so many Australians still speak fondly about those years. They aren't only remembering lower prices or older houses, they're remembering a time when communities felt closer, families felt secure, and the Australian dream seemed within reach for ordinary people. But that feeling would not last forever. But by the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Australia began entering a very different chapter. The change wasn't sudden. It happened quietly, one decision at a time, until many Australians looked around and realized the country they knew was slowly disappearing. Around the world, globalization was accelerating. For Australia, this meant opening its economy to greater international competition. Imported goods became cheaper. Overseas manufacturing expanded rapidly. Australian businesses suddenly found themselves competing against countries with much lower production costs. At first, many Australians welcomed the cheaper prices. Imported televisions, clothing, appliances, and electronics filled Australian stores. Consumers had more choices than ever before, but every bargain carried a hidden cost that few people noticed at the time. Across Australia, factories that had employed generations of Australian workers began reducing staff. Some closed entirely. Communities built around manufacturing suddenly faced uncertainty. Jobs that had supported Australian families for decades disappeared, often never to return. The sound of factory machines was replaced by silence. At the same time, Australia's economy was changing. Mining, finance, and services became increasingly important. Many new opportunities emerged for skilled professionals in growing industries. But for countless Australian tradespeople and factory workers, adapting wasn't easy. The secure jobs their parents had relied on were becoming harder to find. Meanwhile, another challenge was quietly growing. House prices, once considered manageable for ordinary Australians, began rising faster than wages in many parts of Australia. Owning a home slowly became more difficult for young Australian families. The dream that had once seemed achievable through hard work alone now required bigger loans and greater financial pressure. Yet Australia also gained many positive changes. Technology transformed everyday life. Healthcare improved. Universities expanded. The country became more connected to the world than ever before. Still, many Australians couldn't ignore a difficult question. As Australia became wealthier in many ways, had it also lost something that couldn't be measured in economic statistics? That question still echoes across Australian homes today, and it may explain why so many people look back on the past with both pride and longing. It would be easy to say that everything in Australia was better in the past, but that wouldn't be true. The story of Australia is far more complicated than simple nostalgia. Over the past few decades, Australians have seen incredible progress. Medical breakthroughs have helped Australians live longer and healthier lives. Modern hospitals across Australia now provide treatments that previous generations could only dream about. Technology has transformed how Australians work, learn, and communicate. Families can speak with loved ones across the world in seconds. Australian businesses can reach global markets with a single click. Young Australians have access to universities, careers, and opportunities that were unimaginable just 50 years ago. Australia has also become one of the world's most diverse nations. People from every corner of the globe have helped shape modern Australia, bringing new ideas, cultures, businesses, and innovation that continue to strengthen Australian society. These achievements deserve to be celebrated, but every step forward has also raised difficult questions. While Australia gained new opportunities, it also watched many of its factories close. As Australian cities expanded, many country towns struggled to keep young families from leaving. As the economy became wealthier on paper, many Australians found it harder to buy their first home. Job security changed too. Previous generations of Australians often spent decades working for one employer. Today, many Australian workers face short-term contracts, rising living costs, and constant uncertainty about the future. Communities also began to change. Local businesses disappeared as shopping centers and online retailers grew. The corner milk bar became a memory. Many neighborhoods became busier, but not always closer. For countless Australians, the greatest loss wasn't a factory, a company, or a particular industry. It was the feeling of certainty, the belief that hard work alone would guarantee a secure future. Perhaps that's why so many Australians don't simply miss the old days. They miss the confidence that tomorrow would almost certainly be better than today. That feeling is much harder to rebuild than any factory. So, what did our parents really leave behind for Australia? Was it the factories, the roads, the houses, the railways? Or was it something far more valuable? The greatest legacy of those Australians wasn't made of concrete or steel. It was a way of thinking. They believed that if every Australian worked hard, looked after their neighbors, and invested in the future, the entire country would grow stronger. That belief helped build modern Australia. Our parents and grandparents didn't have unlimited technology. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have smartphones or artificial intelligence. Yet they built schools across Australia. They built hospitals that cared for millions. They built highways connecting Australian communities from coast to coast. They built factories that employed generations of Australian workers. Most importantly, they built hope. Hope that every Australian child could enjoy a better life than the one before. Today, Australia faces different challenges. Housing's more expensive. Many Australian industries have disappeared. Country towns continue to fight for survival. Young Australians often wonder whether they'll ever own a home or enjoy the same security their parents once knew. These are real concerns. But the story of Australia has never been about giving up when times become difficult. Every generation of Australians has faced its own obstacles: war, economic downturns, droughts, floods, recessions. Yet somehow Australians kept rebuilding. Perhaps that's the lesson our parents left behind. Not that life was easier, but that ordinary people working together can overcome extraordinary challenges. Maybe the Australian dream was never just about owning a house or driving a Holden. Maybe it was about believing that tomorrow could always be better than today. That dream doesn't belong only to the past. It belongs to every Australian willing to build, create, innovate, and care about the future of this country. Because the next chapter of Australia's story has not been written yet. And one day, future generations may look back on us and ask a simple question. Or did we let it slip away? That answer is being written today.